podcast. I'm recording this episode on Thursday, August 27th. So yesterday was the day that the NBA teams and players boycotted games. So I don't know if the season is going to continue for sure or not, but I guess I'm just going to kind of talk about it as if it is for now. So to start off, Sixers fired Brett Brown. I don't think I've talked about that in an episode yet. It's been a little while since I've recorded one, but that was very expected, I would say. Apparently, the main candidates for the next head coaching job for the Philadelphia 76ers, they're looking at like Ty Lue and Jay Wright, I believe. Jay Wright, for those of you who don't know, is the head coach of Villanova Wildcats, which, they're a college basketball team in Philadelphia. So he's a hometown guy and a very successful, one of the most successful college coaches in recent years. Villanova won 2 national championships in, I think, a 3-year span. And a lot of his players are in the NBA now. A lot of guys that have come through Villanova. But yeah, so the only thing with that is coaches don't have a super great history of jumping from college to the NBA and having instant success. It doesn't usually happen. I think Brad Stevens is really one of the only ones I can think of, in the past 10 years that has come from college basketball and immediately was a pretty good NBA coach. And now, he's a really good NBA coach. So, and Jay Wright is much older than Brad Stevens was, probably a little bit more set in his ways and such. And I've heard it said that the NBA is really hard to acclimate to get used to, when you're coming from a different league like NCAA as well as overseas in other leagues. Coaches who switch to the NBA typically don't do well when they first start. If you can remember David Blatt, who was one of the most well-renowned coaches in worldwide basketball, and I think he was only with the Cavs for 1 season and got fired, and then they hired Ty Lue and won a championship. But that brings me to Ty Lue now. Ty Lue is the other main candidate for this position with the Sixers, which I kind of predicted in an episode recently. I think it was 2 episodes ago, where I talked about how Ty Lue was going to have a really busy summer, a really busy offseason. Actually, I believe that was episode 7, actually. But yeah, if you guys want to hear that, go listen to that then, if you haven't listened to it yet. But yeah, I think a coaching change will be good for this organization to try to take it in a bit more, conventional way. I also have heard rumors of that they're moving Elton Brand as well, who, is the GM with the Sixers, moving him to a different position in the organization. So somebody will probably come in and have a new vision for how to build this roster. And, you would think that one of the first moves would be to move off of either Simmons or Embiid. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know if they're really trying to just make that marriage work between them, but it's kind of like, and I don't really get the people saying the problem is that they don't like each other off the court or something. From what I've seen, which I'm not super familiar with them, I guess, but from what I've seen, they get along just fine. Like they're good buddies, but that's not really what matters. They have very contrasting play styles. They don't fit on the court together very well. And for those of you who don't really know what I'm talking about, in the modern game, it's all about spacing. If you have a superstar that can't provide spacing off ball, the team kind of needs to be built around him on the offensive end of the floor. If he's a premier scoring threat at the rim or from mid-range or something, if he's that type of player, which both Embiid and Simmons are. Simmons is a transcendent table setter, and when Simmons gets going downhill against a team in transition, he's like Giannis-like. That's how special of a player he is in that way. In a half-court set, where you have a team built the way that this Sixers team has been built, the past several seasons, he doesn't really mesh well in a half-court set with those other guys. Where you would see Simmons, I think, flourish and thrive is in a Bucks type system, in a system where it's built very similarly to the Bucks around Giannis, but instead of Giannis, it's Ben Simmons. I think you would see a lot of the same results and possibly even better in a way. Maybe not overall, but when you're comparing and contrasting Giannis versus Ben Simmons, I think most people would agree, at least right now, Giannis is the better at-rim finisher, the better guy going downhill. As far as people going downhill in transition, really nobody's been as good as Giannis ever. But I don't think we've been able to see all that Ben Simmons is capable of because he hasn't been on a team that allows him to work that way, really. We haven't seen that optimized, so it's hard to say what Ben Simmons could be in that realm. But what we have seen is that Ben Simmons is a much more gifted passer than Giannis is. Giannis is a capable passer who's turned into a really good playmaker because of the system that he's in, because of the threat that he is to score. Makes passes come to him much easier. Ben Simmons is already a significantly better passer than Giannis is in terms of impact and in terms of just flair and accuracy and difficulty of what he does, and he's doing it in an environment that is way more challenging for him to have those kinds of opportunities, just because those types of opportunities aren't given to him the way they're given to Giannis in the system that Giannis has flourished in. If you see a team built around Ben Simmons like the Bucks are with Giannis, I think you would see some really special things. And that's, for Ben Simmons' career as well as most GMs in the league, they should be wanting Ben Simmons for that reason. He's one of the best defenders in the NBA already at his young age of I think he's 22, 23, something like that. And I think one of the most gifted passers in the NBA and one of the best transition players. He can, and in the half court set, he can do really what Giannis does as well. But even he'd be a even harder person to build a wall against, to double in that sense, because he's gonna be able to hurt you way more than Giannis would, just with his playmaking ability. His gifts on in that sense are just next level. So I think that would be interesting for the Sixers to try to keep Simmons and trade Embiid somewhere, for those reasons. But that's one option. The other option would be to trade Simmons and build around Embiid. And I think that's probably easier for what the Sixers have right now. I think a team built around Embiid is closer to what they have if they were to shop Simmons and try to get something in return that you can pair along with Embiid. I mean, what you're looking for is pretty similar to what you would want with Simmons. You'd want people that can stretch the floor around Embiid, but also people that can cut and move off ball, do all those types of things, with Embiid being more of a ball stopper. Simmons and Giannis, when they're optimized, they're not really ball stoppers. They carry the ball and move it. They'll take it to the rim or dish it out. Embiid will be more of a post up type of threat. I think if he's optimized to his best capabilities, and to build around that, you want shooters, catch and shoot guys just like you would want with Giannis and Simmons, but you'd also want people that can dive, crash to the rim, and also people, a second shot creator, somebody that can get a shot when you need it from the perimeter, from other places besides just Embiid posting up, would be another good option. And then also you'd want a primary ball handler. Simmons on his team can be a good primary ball handler. It'd be nice, in terms of options, to have another one, to have more of a traditional point guard alongside of Simmons, alongside of Giannis, like they have with Eric Bledsoe and George Hill. But with Embiid, it's kind of a necessity. Getting a point guard in return for what you get for Simmons would be good. I think that, the two players I just listed, somebody that can be the ball handler and shot creator, you can get those two things in one guy, really. And if they decide to trade Simmons, they can probably get that in return. If not, and they can just get a really good pure point guard who can knock down threes, that work too. And then Tobias Harris can be kind of fill that role of the secondary shot creator. That would work too. But yeah, I think that building around Embiid is just closer to reality than Simmons would be. Simmons would take a full rebuild, I would say. Embiid, you can probably get really close to what you want just through the one trade, just through the Simmons trade, because they already have Korkmaz, who is a great shooter. I think he's kind of overlooked in that way, but try to get ball handling and shooting options out of a trade with Simmons. I'm sure most teams would give you a pretty massive haul back for a player like Ben Simmons. So I think you'd have a lot of options to go with. But yeah, so I'd expect to see that. Well, I wouldn't say expect, but I wouldn't be surprised if that is what happens. I wouldn't be surprised either way. I could definitely see them being like, no, we changed coaches. We're going to give somebody else a crack at this. We really want to keep Embiid and Simmons together, that type of thing, which I'm not saying it can't work. I'm not saying that you can't build a successful offense around those two together. I'm just saying it's way more complicated than what I'm talking about, way more complicated than a formula that's pretty easy to conceive, of just having one of those guys and putting pieces that on paper just fit better around them. That's what it's been with the Sixers the past several seasons now, is they have loads of talent from the process that they went through of tanking and getting high draft picks and having tons of assets. It's just all of those assets have never really seemed to fit on paper very well. Like, it's kind of like, an example of this is when they traded for Tobias Harris last season. At the deadline, they traded away Landry Shamet and some other stuff, I think some picks or something, to get Tobias Harris. And like, while you're getting a more talented player in Tobias Harris versus Landry Shamet, it's kind of a wacky fit along with what you had. Tobias Harris hasn't shown to be really a spot up 3-point shooter, a catch and shoot 3-point shooter very effectively, and his game is more of being a ISO shot creator in a way, and like a third grade, like not a very high tier one at that. Like, he's kind of one that's you're probably want to be like your second or third option doing that. So yeah, it was just kind of a wacky fit to throw in there with guys like Redick and Embiid and Simmons and Jimmy Butler. I think that Shamet would have been a better fit for that, having Shamet kind of run the point in a way, secondarily, be the secondary ball handler to, or even tertiary to Butler and Simmons. Those guys would handle the ball most of the game. Shamet and JJ Redick can be, your spot up 3-point shooters, guys who can run off screens, relocate, get good shots from the perimeter, both like sharpshooters, especially Redick. But that's Shamet's game as well, and he was a young guy, starting his career, and then you have Embiid. Still that's still not a super great fit with Embiid, Simmons, and Butler, all of whom cannot really shoot from the perimeter. Like, Butler's probably the best shooter out of those guys, but he's not a very gifted 3-point shooter. He just has a different game. Like, they've had all this talent, but just not what you would think of when you're drafting a team, trying to build a team on paper in terms of fit, if you get what I'm saying. So they've been good enough. Like, a lot of people have been defending them and saying, like, well, it works. Like, they get, in the 50s in wins every season. It seems like that works. It's like, yeah, but you want to get better than that. That's not as good. 50-something wins isn't as good as the roster that you have. You have a roster to be one of the best teams in the NBA in terms of talent, but you don't get there because your fit and system don't mesh well, and your coach isn't really helping anything either. Like, some people are really behind Brett Brown in the way that, like, he was just given a horrible team to try to work with. And while I'll concede to that point a little bit, just because, yeah, like, the team they built was not very coach friendly. Like, it's a hard team to try to really get the best out of, to really optimize. But Brett Brown never really showed any willingness to, or at least never showed any inkling that he was adapting or progressing to new game plans, to new X's and O's, things to try in terms of, like, offense, really. And so that just never really worked. It seemed like he was kind of trying to just put in place the Spurs offensive system that he was a part of for so long, trying to force these pieces into a pre-established offense, pre-established system, instead of the other way around, adapting the system to optimize what the players do best. Like, like coaches like Brad Stevens and Nick Nurse are guys that's what they do. They don't have a system, really. They make the system based off of the roster. They optimize what their guys do best and are really malleable in that way. And that's just something that Brett Brown never really showed the ability to do. And that's really what I think you're going to need if you're coaching such an unconventionally built team as the Philadelphia 76ers have been. So if you're trying to keep that roster together the way you had it, you need a coach like Nick Nurse or Brad Stevens, really. And there's not really many of those guys out there. So, that's going to be a hard thing to try to get. But yeah, so I'd say I think the best idea for the Sixers is to shop one of those guys, for sure. But yeah, I think I'm going to move on from that and briefly mention, the Pacers also just fired Nate McMillan, so he's up for a coaching job as well. I thought Nate McMillan did a really good job with the Pacers this year, just because, I guess I don't watch tons of Pacers basketball, so I don't know for sure. But, coming into the season, I did not expect them to have as successful as a season as they have had, just because of, missing Oladipo and the odd fit between Sabonis and Turner, kind of like just the same thing we were talking about with Simmons and Embiid. Another weird pairing that is in the NBA of kind of the better players on a team are Turner and Sabonis. They defensively fit together great, I think, just like Simmons and Embiid do. But offensively, it's kind of clunky having those two on the floor at the same time. And so, yeah, I guess Pacers is just kind of a mini version of the Sixers right now, of what they're trying to pull together. They just fired their coach, and now they're exploring ideas and whether they should shop one of them. I think, if they're going to move off of one of them, I think everybody would assume they move off of Turner. A season ago, that was way more of a debate than it is now. A season ago, it was like, who do you want to keep, Turner or Sabonis? Turner probably looked like maybe a little bit better of a player a year ago than Sabonis did. But now, Sabonis, he emerged as an all-star this season, and they kind of started taking Turner off the bench a little bit for a while. I think that Turner would be the one that they try to move off of. Unless they really want to blow it up, Sabonis is somebody you can get probably a bigger trade haul for at this point, but I think you can get a pretty decent amount of assets for Miles Turner as well. I think that a team like maybe even the Nuggets would like to have a Miles Turner, possibly. Don't quote me on that. I doubt that that's actually what they'll do, but playing GM myself, I think Miles Turner could be an interesting piece to pair alongside Jokic. Could be on the floor at the same time, somebody that we really just turn into a 3-point shooter, have him just shoot threes a ton and, really just work on that. Be just basically a 3-and-D center, somebody that can block shots, protect the paint, be a rim protector, and then shoot threes on the other end. I think would go pretty well alongside Jokic and help our defensive struggles that we're going through right now quite a bit. But I would still probably vote for my initial idea that I've had in that other episode. I think it was last episode I talked about. Just instead of going the rim protector route, getting long switchable defenders to stop drives at the point of attack would probably be the route I go. Typically, you can find better shooters in that mold as well than you can in rim protectors. So I think that'd be a better way to go. But there definitely would be some teams that would go after Turner for sure, I'd say. Yeah, we'll see. I'm going to look at the NBA schedule to see if they have updated anything. Yeah, no, it says... Okay, so Game 5 So the games that they were supposed to play yesterday will all be played tomorrow, but the time is to be determined at this point. And the games today that were supposed to happen are postponed. So Game 6 of Nuggets, Utah, and Game 6 of Clippers, Mavericks are postponed, which, yeah, we'll see how that stuff goes. I'd say I pick Clippers to win their series and probably Jazz to win the other one. I'm rooting for the Nuggets though, obviously, and I'm kind of rooting for the Mavericks also. I like to root for the underdogs usually, and also Nuggets are my team for those of you who are, if this is your first episode listening. So I'd like to see the Nuggets keep up the intensity that we had on defense from last game, because really that's the only way I think we can beat the Jazz, is overcome our defensive disadvantage with just sheer effort and willpower, and then also continue to have really hot nights on the offensive end of the floor, which most players on the Nuggets were not hot. It was really just Jokic and Murray that got hot. Jokic had that 21 point first quarter where he made 5 of 5 from 3 and 8 of 8 from the field. And then Murray in the second half was hitting everything. Most of our role players were not hitting threes, not hitting their shots. I think Jeremy Grant hit a pretty big one down the stretch, but not really much other than that I can remember. In that last episode where I talked about guys that would fit well in the Nuggets system, or the system that I would like to build for the Nuggets, would be Royce O'Neal. I think would be awesome to have on the Nuggets. He's exactly the type of player I was talking about, where he's a guy who can knock down, catch and shoot threes, and then he's a really long switchable defender, a guy that can stay in front of his man. I think that he would work perfectly for what I'm I'm wanting or what I think the team needs. But yeah, he's not a free agent this summer, but man, I'd love to get a guy like that, Royce O'Neal. Yeah, and then to continue giving my predictions, I guess what's gonna happen to wrap up this first round series. I pick Lakers probably win game 5 tomorrow. Put that thing away. Rockets Thunder, I don't really know. I've really liked what I've seen from the Thunder the past couple games with Lou Dort on Harden really wearing him down. I feel like I don't know. It's a hard one. That's if Rockets make their threes, they're gonna be hard to beat. But I think if the Thunder start playing smaller like they have started to the last 2 games with Gallinari in there at 5 and having Dort at the 4 offensively basically, but he's guarding Harden on the defensive end, and then having the 3-headed point guard monster of Paul, Schroeder, and SGA. I think that's good. That's a good idea. They can guard the Rockets, and also if they're playing, I think really the secret to the Rockets, I was thinking for a long time, was just bully them, play big. But I feel like that's exactly what they kind of want you to do. They want you to try to beat them with size, which I don't think it's impossible to. I think you can. But I think the best way to beat the Rockets, if you have the players for it, if you have the pieces for it, is to play faster than them. Because it's like if you have guys that can get past the Rockets defenders, how are they gonna? They have no rim protection. Who's gonna stop you? And I feel like that's what we've seen the past 2 games with SGA and Schroeder. Like they're too quick. Paul even really. I mean, he's not really getting to the rim quite as much as he was when in his younger days. But he's working on the defense and hitting mid-range jumpers when he needs to. But Schroeder and SGA getting to the rim at will basically, and then you still have the option of Gallinari who can post up most of the guys on the Rockets and hit mid-range jumpers. And, you're not. I don't think you're giving up too much in terms of rebounding, really. Paul is a good rebounder for a 6-foot point guard. SGA and Schroeder aren't bad rebounders as well. Dort, Gallo. I think the Rockets are probably a better rebounding team if that's what you have out there for the most part, especially if they have Russell Westbrook, but they don't. So, yeah. That's going to be an interesting one to see. I don't think I'm going to really pick. I think I would like to see the Thunder win just because, I like rooting for underdogs. I feel like the Thunder are kind of the underdog in this series. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. And so, in the East, the Heat swept the Pacers. Yeah, they did. I predicted that series would go 5. It went 4. Heat did a little bit better than I thought they were. Well, I guess the Pacers just didn't give up as much of a fight as I thought they would. This Heat team, though, is looking really good. I think presents some real problems for the Bucks next round. The Bucks are still in their series with the Magic 3-1, but unless something really crazy happens, I think the Bucks are winning in 5. But yeah, I think that the Heat match up pretty well against the Bucks just because I think Bam Adebayo is one of the best options really in the league to try to guard Giannis. He's just built that way. He's not a traditional big slow guy that's going to, because some teams try to throw speed at Giannis, but, those guys aren't big enough. And then some teams like to throw size at Giannis, but those guys aren't fast enough. Bam Adebayo is both those things at once. He's just as big as Giannis for the most part. He's a tiny bit smaller. Like he's like 6'9", Giannis is 6'11", but very similar builds. And he's just as quick, just as athletic. Really, can match that on the defensive end of the floor. I think that's going to be really interesting to see if he can lock in on that end. And then offensively, so the Bucks, their whole thing this season is they've given up more threes per game than every other team. They've given up more points from 3 than every other team in the NBA. And the Heat are one of the best 3-point shooting teams in the league, especially how they're shooting right now, with Duncan Robinson hitting like 7 threes a game, and Goran Dragic is hitting his threes as well. Tyler Hero, Jimmy Butler's even hitting his threes. Kelly Olynyk is, he can get hot coming off the bench. Kendrick Nunn can shoot it a bit. Yeah, I think that's going to present some problems for the Bucks if the Heat are still hitting their threes. And then also down the stretch of games, if the Heat are playing them close at all, I think the Heat win that battle. Because like the whole problem with the Bucks is, they win most of the game, and that's how they win. But down the stretch in close games against teams that have good half court ISO scores, they typically lose those battles just because they don't have, they have Giannis who can score at will most of the game. But when it really the intensity really dials up right at the end of a game, and everybody's keyed in on him. And he has to just create a drive and a half court set. That's just it's a hard thing to pull off, and we haven't really seen him really execute in those final moments like that. And then, Chris Middleton has never really showed to be a clutch scorer, or, especially ISO scorer at that. He's somebody that can kind of get to his spots, get good shots during the course of a game, can, create shots for the most part. But, down the stretch of a game, I don't think he's really your last 2 minutes best shot possible, or, go get you a bucket type of guy. And that's what Jimmy Butler is on the Heat. That's what Tyler Hero is really. He is really young. He's a rookie, but he possesses that kind of confidence. That's what he's kind of in the NBA to do, is to hit big shots and difficult shots, and then they have those other 3-point options too. They, as last resort, they got Duncan Robinson, Dragic, and Nunn, and, Jay Crowder, those guys. So yeah, I think the Heat can win. I might pick them, just trying to be bold a little bit, and I don't feel too bad about it. I think I pick Heat in 6 or 7, probably 7. I think that's what I'm going to go with. I think it's going to be a hard-fought series, but I think I'm going to pick the Heat. And yeah, I think that's what I'm going to go with. I guess I feel pretty good about that, just because the Bucks haven't looked super good in this first round series. Nobody besides Giannis has really played super well. Eric Bledsoe has been playing pretty awful. Chris Middleton had a few really bad games. Brook Lopez hasn't looked great. So yeah, if just trajectory and momentum, I pick Heat. So the other second round series in the East is going to be between the Celtics and the Raptors, and they're both already through with their first round series. The Raptors swept the Nets and the Celtics swept the Sixers, so their games for round 2 can actually probably start before everybody's finished with this first round. I'm guessing is something that I've heard, that some of the games will overlap just to try to get everything done as fast as possible, especially with the delay we're in right now. So yeah, and as far as that series goes, I'd say this one's a hard one. This one's a really hard one, just because in my mind just now, I decided to give the slight edge to the Celtics, but I kind of forgot about the Gordon Hayward injury. I don't know if he's going to be back at all for the Raptors series or not, but I know that his wife is due sometime this month, in September. So he's going to leave the bubble anyways, whether he's healthy or not at some point. And so, yeah, I guess it's probably just safe to count him out for this series. But yeah, I guess to just compare and contrast these teams a little bit, the Raptors, I think, so they were a better regular season team for sure, just in terms of their coaching and system and offenses and defenses that they ran. They put together a really nice year, and they're a super good team in transition. I think they're one of the best in the league. I think it's them and Milwaukee and the Lakers are the 3 best transition teams in the league. So, but that is where a lot of their points come from, is in transition. And they're facing a team in the Celtics who have had the best transition defense this entire season. So they match up. I'd say Boston matches up pretty well with them there. And also, just in the playoffs in general, it's said a lot that the game slows down in the playoffs, that regular season games are won in the full court and playoff games are won in the half court, just because intensity is dialed up. You can't get some of those easy openings or passing lanes or opportunities that you might see through the course of a less intense game. When the intensity is dialed up at the end of a playoff game, those opportunities really start to shrink, just because the defense is much more engaged. And so what we've seen when teams are playing it close in the playoffs is usually the team with the better half court scoring opportunities down the stretch, with a team with a better ISO score, somebody that can get a bucket pretty efficiently in the final possessions of a game, are the teams that really do hold a big advantage. And I think the Celtics definitely have more of that than the Raptors do. I think they have the best 2 players, at least. Yeah, I'd say the best 2 players in this series as far as that skill goes, of being able to just score in isolation at the end of a game, and that's Jason Tatum and Kemba Walker. On the Raptors side, they have Siakam and Van Vliet and Lowry, that possess that skill a bit, but I think Kemba and Jason Tatum are just like I guess another tier above them. Like that's one of their strengths. I wouldn't say for Siakam that that's one of his strengths as a player. It's something that he's been progressing at and been getting better at, but I wouldn't say it's a strength. Same with Kyle Lowry. I wouldn't say that's really a strength of his. Van Vliet, kind of, I guess it's one of his strengths, I'd say, but Van Vliet's, I guess, overall not really the same level of player as Kemba or JT, especially when it comes to that skill in particular. And then the Celtics also have Jaylen Brown, who I'd say is somewhat capable of that as well. So, I give the nod to the Celtics in that department for sure. But, I think the advantage that the Raptors have over the Celtics is I think Nick Nurse is the most creative coach in the NBA and is really not afraid to try anything. And I think that that's going to be something that can really throw many teams off over the course of a playoff series. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And also, all those stats that I just kind of listed off with like transition teams, like transition defense and everything like that. The Celtics, that data comes from when they had Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward isn't like a premier perimeter defender or anything like that, but I guess it's just a bit of a different team, a different makeup without him. Marcus Smart is going to be getting a good number of his minutes, I'd say. He'll be starting. And, Marcus Smart is one of the best defenders in the NBA. So maybe they'll even improve, but I guess we don't know. I think Wanamaker and maybe Javonte Green will get some of those minutes as well from Hayward. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think I'm going to go risky again and give the slight edge to the Celtics. And so if my predictions end up correct, we're going to have a Miami and Boston Eastern Conference Finals. I don't feel great about that, but I guess it is what I'm kind of, by breaking down, I guess, my thoughts of it, I'd say that's probably my best guess. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's Bucks Heat as well, or Bucks Raptors as well. That almost just feels more right, just like thinking of it without really diving deep into it. Just saying that just seems more right, but yeah, we'll see what happens. And then over in the West, I'm guessing Lakers take care of that series, like I said before, and Clippers take care of theirs. I'm taking Utah, sadly, to pull it out over Denver, and I am also taking Houston. I don't remember what I said earlier. I don't remember what I said earlier in this episode, if I said that I picked Houston or OKC, but I think I'm going to pick Houston just because it is announced that Russell Westbrook will be debuting in Game 5 for this series. So yeah, I think I'm going to give the slight edge to the Houston Rockets, but that's going to be a fun series to see too, and I hope it goes 7 for sure. With Lakers and Portland, this series kind of, in a way, it turned out a little bit kind of like how I thought it would, where Portland was giving up a fight at first. Then I think the Lakers really just figured that out. Also, I wasn't expecting Portland to be playing so many minutes with Whiteside and Nurkic on the court at the same time. And I think that's a really big reason of why Dame has been much more silent in this series. It looks like he's going to be out for at least the next couple of games, I think, with his knee injury. But, so far in this series, he hasn't really performed at the level that I guess I was expecting him to. I guess probably a lot of people were expecting him to. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think number one, the Lakers really keyed in on him defensively, really focused on getting the ball out of his hands and trying to force McCollum and the other guys to beat them on the mismatch in numbers on the, after they get the ball out of Dame's hands. But another thing that I recently kind of thought of also was that there's not really any driving opportunities for Dame in this series. Number one, because you've got Anthony Davis lurking in the paint, one of the best shot blockers in the NBA. And then kind of related to that is that they also have Whiteside and Nurkic on the Portland side on offense, kind of parked down in the paint most possessions. Like they're not really outside on the key very much, especially Whiteside. And them kind of being in there, allowing their man to sag off of them because they can't really shoot. Nurkic can knock down threes, okay, but not somebody that you really need to stick on very tight to. And Whiteside, you don't have to at all. You could give that to him all night. But so having two guys in there on the court offensively like that just really kind of takes away that whole dimension of Dame's game of, getting to the rim. It just makes it a lot harder for him, just intuitively. And then, also his deep game that is kind of taken away just because they pretty much pick him up full court and they have a second defender meet him at half court and get the ball out of his hands right away, basically every possession. So those shots are taken away as well. And then, if he ever gets it in the flow of the offense from the perimeter, he usually has a guy pretty tight on him. And in that case, if a guy's playing him like that, his best option is usually to blow by him to try to take him to the rim. And that usually works for Dame pretty well. But, having a defense like Los Angeles with Anthony Davis and JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard in the paint, and also having them so close to where you're going to the rim just because they can sag off so easily from having both Nurkic and Whiteside out there at the same time, it just really doesn't work out too well. Dame kind of doesn't have a whole lot of options, I'd say, as far as scoring the ball. I know that they have Nurkic and Whiteside in there to match the size of the Lakers, but I guess you kind of need to weigh what's more important. I think it would be wiser of Portland to just have either Nurkic or Whiteside in there with Melo at the 4, Gabriel at the 4, somebody like that. They don't really have much, especially without Collins. But, even Hazonia will probably be getting some minutes at the 4 if they would do what I'm talking about. But, yeah. Also, it looks like Porzingis is going to be out the rest of the series. I just saw. So for the Mavericks and Clippers series, I'd say Clippers have that one locked down, especially with Paul George now showing up and making his shots, playing aggressively. So yeah, it was. I think it's been a good run for this Mavericks team. Nobody was expecting them to be in the position that they are this season. So looking forward, they're going to be a powerhouse team to be reckoned with for years to come, I'd say. So I guess they could just focus on rebooting and getting ready for next season, especially if they're not going to finish this postseason, which there's still kind of talks of. So yeah, we'll see. Another thing that I forgot to mention before was that they did announce the Defensive Player of the Year the other day. The 3 finalists were Anthony Davis, Giannis, and Rudy Gobert. And those are my top 3 as well when I broke down Defensive Player of the Year. And it turns out that Giannis got first, and that was also who I picked to get first. So they released all of the voting outcomes or results. So they showed, all the players that got any sort of first, second, or third place votes. And some other guys on that list were like Marcus Smart, Patrick Beverley, Hassan Whiteside, Andre Drummond, which I was surprised by those two, Ben Simmons, Bam Adebayo, Brook Lopez. I think there were some others too. But, the order that they actually went in based on how many points they got from first, second, and third place votes, it was actually Giannis first, AD second, Gobert third, Ben Simmons fourth, and Bam Adebayo fifth, which was my exact top 5 also in the same order that I ranked them in the episode that I did. So that was pretty cool. So I'm glad that Giannis won it. I would have been happy with either Giannis or AD. I was pretty split between the two of them. But I think this is going to be a nice historic year for Giannis to win Defensive Player of the Year as well as MVP. He's the first one to do that. If he does win MVP, which I'm assuming he will, he'll be the first player to do that since Hakeem and Jordan, and those are the only players to ever do that. So, yeah, it's going to be a nice list for him to be part of and for his legacy. But yeah, let's see if that he can do what those guys did and also win the championship this season. But yeah, we'll see on that. Yeah, it's weird that they're doing votes or doing, the finalists and releasing the awards, like the winners of them right now, and kind of like not at the same time as each other. Like they did Coach of the Year and now they've done DPOY. I don't think they've done anything else yet, but I think that's kind of different. Usually the past several seasons, they've done like an award show after the postseason was finished, where they basically, do a whole like award ceremony and stuff, announce all of the different awards, the candidates, and the winners and everything, and they have them come up and do speeches and stuff. Now I would assume that they would have done it like that again, just like a virtual one, like just on Zoom, or like how a lot of other places have done stuff. But I guess they're just kind of doing it sporadically, like announcing one and then wait like a week later announce the other one. Like I don't know. But yeah, I think it's kind of cool though because it gives us time to react to each one individually. That like take time to appreciate that award individually when it's like only that one that's new to be talking about. But yeah, so that's kind of cool. But and also I like that it's coming before we really get super deep into playoffs, because a lot of times when they do the awards like after the playoffs are done, it's like in the awards are for the regular season. It's like so hard to like remember. Like sometimes it's like, oh yeah, this is an award for how Giannis, because like last year Giannis won MVP, but he went out. The whole narrative of him in the playoffs was he's not as good as Kawhi, and he needs to be better to finish a playoff series, and stuff like that. Like he got outplayed by Kawhi and stuff, and then he wins MVP just that right after that. It's just kind of weird. Like I still agree that he should have won MVP, but it's just kind of weird, like the timing of it. So I kind of like this better. So it's easy to have that recency like memory of what it's for what just happened, the regular season. Even though it's been like 4 or 5 months since most of the regular season games because of COVID and everything. But, yeah, just thought I would mention that stuff. I think this will be it for this episode. I want to do episodes in the near future with somebody else, with Jacob or, one of my friends to talk about stuff. Even though a lot of my friends that I have don't pay attention to basketball on the same level I do, I think that it'd probably make the episodes a lot more enjoyable to have another person talking besides me, just because sometimes when I listen back to my episodes I can tell like they seem really boring, or it kind of seems like I'm talking really unenthusiastic. It's hard to control that sometimes when I'm just talking to myself. It sounds a lot less conversational, and especially in the parts where I'm not talking passionately about something, if it's like a part that I just need to talk about to get to the next part, or things like that. So I think it would be best to get some episodes where I'm kind of talking with somebody, but I'll have to line up scheduling wise with somebody else and do all that. But yeah, so if Jacob, if you're listening, hit me up. We're gonna do an episode together. Okay, we can put it on this feed or your feed. I guess, I don't know, maybe both feeds. I don't care, but we're gonna do something. Yeah, like I said, that's it for this episode. If you're listening on YouTube and you like the podcast, please press like and consider following the channel. If you're listening on Spotify, please consider following the Spotify feed. But as always, I'll talk to you guys next time.